We all have an instinct that it is wrong to tell a lie. But why? I, for one, endeavor to always tell the truth, and I would advise you guys to do the same. But sometimes even I fails in this regard. But that doesn't diminish the quest for truth. I believe that lies are incredibly common, not only to our fellow human beings, but to ourselves as well. Just think of the time when you had a really bad day and someone asks you how you're doing, and you simply reply by saying, "I'm fine." This might seem innocent, but it is indeed a lie. Let me tell you why you shouldn't lie. Kant was infamously against any kind of lie. Not telling lies is what he calls a perfect duty, which means that it yields no exceptions. Kant thought that the way to know that an act is strictly forbidden is, roughly put, to ask yourself what the world would look like if everybody performed the same act. If this world you're picturing ends up in a logical contradiction, then you should simply never perform that act, for it would be irrational. So if you look at this argument, you can clearly see that we end up in a contradiction. Therefore, you should never tell lies, because by doing so, you ultimately contradict yourself. But this is very problematic. Let's discuss the case of the axe murderer. Let's say that you're enjoying a cozy evening at home, and all of a sudden you hear a knock on the door. You open the door, and there stands your friend, panting, saying, "An axe murderer is hunting me. Can I hide in your wardrobe?" You reply, "Of course, jump in here." 10 minutes later, you hear another knock at the door. You open it to find the axe murderer. "Where is your friend?" he asks you. In this situation, you can either lie to the axe murderer, telling him you haven't seen your friends in years, or tell the truth that he is hiding in your wardrobe. Here we have two conflicting duties: the duty not to tell lies and the duty to help others. But the first one is a perfect duty that yields no exceptions, while the second one is merely an imperfect one. So if we follow Kant all the way, we simply should throw our friend under the bus and tell the murderer where he is. But that is absurd. Maybe we should instead become rule utilitarians to solve this issue. According to utilitarianism, we should always aim to maximize happiness. Through this, we can proclaim common rules to follow. One such rule could be that telling the truth commonly leads to happiness. But sometimes we just know when an act of telling a lie will lead to greater happiness than telling the truth, such as in the axe murderer example. In those cases, it would just be wrong to tell the truth, since it most definitely will lead to a decrease in happiness. So here, we should simply deviate from the rule, but this leads me to a problem with rule utilitarianism. It is faced with a horned dilemma. Either we accept that there are exceptions to our rules, like the example just mentioned, but then it seems that our rule utilitarianism collapses into act utilitarianism. I should always calculate which action will lead to a greater amount of happiness. Why not tell a lie now and then if it makes people happy? But act utilitarianism has its problems. Or we accept no deviation from our rule. But if we go down that route, it seems as though we are not utilitarians anymore, since we're literally not aiming to maximize happiness, but instead following rules that commonly leads to happiness. Maybe we should instead endorse the moral pluralism of W.D. Ross. According to Ross, we have these 7 prima facie duties, all of which are on par. None of them is more important than the other. So in the axe murderer example, we mainly have two conflicting duties, the duty of fidelity and the duty of beneficence. According to Ross, we need to balance these two duties against each other, and the one that is most stringent becomes my duty proper, the duty that I should act upon. In this case, it is easy to say that the stringent duty here is to help your friend. So through this, we have solved the axe murderer problem at the price of introducing moral pluralism. Some people might find this satisfying, but let me give you a different solution within Kantianism. Kant grounds the notion of morality within rationality. Morality is what he calls synthetic a priori. Roughly put, morality exists a priori, but it is something you realize when you've reached a certain capacity of rationality. Through this, Kant explicitly says that we can treat animals in any way we want, since they are not rational, autonomous beings. We don't have any real obligation towards them. Of course, that doesn't mean we should torture them or treat them any way we want. But here is the thing. We know that the axe murderer wants to kill your friend. In other words, he wants to break the perfect duty of not killing. By showing this intention to kill, he also reveals that he is not rational, which means we do not have any obligation towards him in the same way that we do towards rational beings. Hence, it is okay to lie to him since he is not a rational being. And also, Kant was not a pacifist. Self-defense is morally permissible, and maybe the act of lying in this case can be seen as a way of defending the innocent. Maybe I'm deviating a bit too much from Kant when I want to accept a break with a perfect duty. But what do you guys think? Does this solution check out? Well, we discussed a lot about Kantianism there. And if you want to know more about Kantianism, then I suggest you to check this video out here where I discuss the basics.